Hello, welcome to Erica Reacts. Today we have a really exciting episode. I've been interviewing these lovely gentlemen, and if this is your first episode tuning in, you may wonder what we're doing here. But this is basically a Grateful Dead fan panel discussion. So this is a Deadhead cross-generational meeting, and it was based on the fact that we had a boomer, a Generation Jones, and a Gen X. And so they all kind of started following the band at different times, but they have the Dead in common. And then here I am as the historian and host and moderator. So I feel like and I'm sure you guys have all watched each other's interviews.
Yep.
So you probably have questions for each other. So I say we just kind of dive in. And if there's questions, I'll sometimes have a random question I've thought of. But yeah. So what did you guys think from each other's interviews? Like, any questions to each other or thoughts?
Well, I already asked Jeff the one if he's ever been to the Uptown Theater in Chicago because I just thought it was a really cool theater. And I knew there was a chance he hadn't seen the Dead there, but it didn't close for a few years after that. And unfortunately, it's just sitting there abandoned. It's a really cool place.
Oh, I,
Yeah, my kind of go-to venue was Alpine Valley until they couldn't play there anymore because they got too big and it was just too much. But that was my summer ritual was heading up to Alpine Valley in Wisconsin.
So your first year was 85, right?
Yeah,
Was it Alpine?
yeah, yeah.
I was actually at those shows and I was selling t-shirts then.
Oh, that's awesome. I went one night, the 21st. My first ever song was Cold Rain and Snow. And I remember, and I mentioned this to Erica, a buddy of mine had given me a tape with a whole bunch of stuff. And there were two songs they played that night that I recognized, right? It was Truckin' and Sugar Magnolia. And for me, that was a win. I liked everything else, but I'm like, okay, I recognize two songs. That's awesome.
So when I lived in Phoenix, Tempe area, um, I played in several bands, but a couple semi-dead cover bands, and there were some other ones. Actually, one of them still around called Extra Ticket. They still play. It's been 30 years or whatever. Um, and that was if I would happen to show up, I knew the bass player. He was in the first band I was in. Well, different bass player now, but whatever. That's Cold Rain and Snow is the song that they play when I came up to play with
Nice.
them.
okay. I bet you guys have been at a lot of the same shows. Like, I bet between the three of you, you've actually over crossed paths before.
Hey, Robert, what was your first show? What year?
October 76, Detroit.
Oh, 76, Detroit. Okay. Um, yeah, well, we may have been we may have been at different shows. I saw the majority of my shows on the East Coast. I saw a handful of shows on the West Coast, mostly. And I think, I had mentioned, right, thank you, Jeff, for sending me the reminder about the Englishtown project. I'm glad those guys are still going. It's a weird project that they're on, but so many people I'm sure go to see them. So, what's Englishtown? What is that all about? But it's cool that they're still doing it. Yeah, I think that something I guess that maybe we could talk about too is like what do you guys think about the differences between how the vibe you would see on the East Coast and the vibe you would see on the West Coast, right? Because it was different. I
Uh,
mean, it always depended on like where you were in your life. We've been seeing them for decades, and I know that there's an East Coast feel and there's a West Coast feel, and the venues are a little different and all that kind of the time of year you go see them and all that kind of thing is all that can be pretty different. I know that when I saw them on the West Coast, which I didn't see too many shows, but I saw them at Irvine Meadows, which was kind of a fucked up show, kind of a weird place.
it is.
It is, right? Yeah, there's
Yeah,
something about that
I
place.
hate I hate that place.
And it's a weird vibe. And first song I saw them do there was "Why Don't We Do It in the Road," which I thought which was cool. It was the first time I saw them do that song. But yeah, weird night, just a weird crowd, weird night. It's pretty heavy shit. I think it was
Yeah,
mid
I
'80s.
so I had a fake backstage pass to Irvine Meadows in like 83 or something like that. And I actually had a ticket too. I was just testing the system to see how far I could get.
I was at
Irvine.
Irvine. Yeah,
Yeah.
I caught a bunch of shows there. Went with a buddy of mine, brought his parents after he'd gone to a whole bunch of shows. They were like super cool people, but were like, wanted to see what this thing was about. And so I went with Eric and his folks, and it was a lot of fun. But it's a really, I mean, look, Irvine's an interesting place for a whole bunch of deadheads to show up. It's a pretty conservative town. The Dead weren't as mainstream as they became in the 90s. Although there was a story I remember I was talking to one of the security guys there, and he was telling me how he much preferred to deal with like the heavy metal folks who like if they're walking on the grass or doing whatever they're not supposed to do, he could just grab them and get real rough. And with the Deadheads, they're all just like no one picked a fight. They're all just, hey man, the grass is here for everyone. We're all, and it's like you can't like push around a guy who's just so chill like that, not trying to pick a fight.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's
So
interesting.
I got all the way to the back of the stage with this backstage pass, and then some guy wanted to see it, and it was obviously phony. So he escorted me out, but I did walk across the stage
That's
between all
pretty
the
cool.
amps and drums and stuff. And then I just got back in line because I had a ticket. I was just being a stupid young, testing the system.
That was your job.
Yeah, so
You're a
Chris,
kid.
to
You're
answer your
supposed to do
question, I
that.
haven't seen them as much on the East Coast because I lived in the Midwest as a teenager, and then in Arizona, I turned 21 in Arizona. But I have
Right.
seen them at Meriwether Post.
Yeah, good
Did do a
place, fun
spring.
place.
I like that place. I did a little spring tour. It was Greensboro, Hampton, Baltimore. So I've seen them at the Hampton. I have seen them at SPAC, Saratoga Performing Arts Center, and I've seen them at the Old Boston Garden. And I have seen them at Madison Square Garden. It is a different energy. It's a little more intense on the East Coast.
Yeah.
But I do, since that came up that May 80 when I saw him in Baltimore, I have a story about kind of how America has changed. And it's, yes, maybe 1980 seems like a long time ago, but in the scheme of
No,
things, it's
really?
not. So after the show, my girlfriend and I was going to Ohio University in Athens, Ohio on the motorcycle, and we rode up to DC. We rode up to the Capitol building. I rode right to the front steps of the Capitol building, midnight, parked my motorcycle. We walked up the steps and we leaned against the doors to the Capitol building and smoked a joint. And not one person ever talked to us the whole time. No
Amazing.
cops, no, it was just a different world.
Yeah. Very different.
Yeah.
But the West Coast was a little mellower, and in the 80s there for a while, they were definitely playing smaller places because the East Coast, they were just almost seemed like they were more popular than they were in California for a while there.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned the Saratoga Performing Arts Center. That was I had seen them there. Well, such a chill place. I've seen a lot of different shows there. But I think the story was that they got banned from there in the mid 80s. Maybe you guys know that. I think
I
it
don't
was
know that.
I
I
think it
saw
was
them in
86,
85.
87, something like that. They got banned because, well, because, people got out of control. It was actually before the Touch of Grey years, but they had been growing so much everywhere simultaneously, and just word got out that they're doing a couple of nights up at Saratoga Performing Arts Center in the middle of the summer. That's what people had nothing else to do, man. You go up there and you go without tickets, and the people who went without tickets, most of them were always okay. But at some point, people that would go without tickets, things would happen, and it would get a little bit too crazy, and things would get a little out of control, and probably maybe security and the heads in the parking lot were all pretty frustrated, and things happened, so the town said, no, 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 sorry. And that was such a beautiful place. It was such surrounded by forests and
You're in the
trees,
woods.
and
It's a pretty interesting place.
so gorgeous. Yeah, it's so nice, that place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never been there, but I've heard it's great. I know other bands that play there, but that's interesting they got banned.
It
It's a
was
Yeah,
really
there's
tough on these smaller towns where people would
it
there'd be
was.
more. There were some shows where there'd be more deadheads in the town than the actual population of the town, and so you don't have the kind of infrastructure to deal with all that. Rex, what you were saying about how you had to walk 9 miles or whatever it was to get to the Englishtown show, and it wasn't like there were vendors there with bottled water. I mean, there was no. I mean, this was just like the middle of nowhere with just people kind of being nice to the visitors, as long as the visitors weren't like peeing on their front lawns and stuff, which I'm sure there was
Yeah.
plenty of that too.
Yeah, and they were cool. They were really cool. That was my first show, and I remember that for them. I mean, I don't remember any weird shit happening at that show. Just sure, tons of weird shit, but nothing violent at all. And and those are the days when people's cars would break down, right? Or people didn't have enough gas to get out of the parking lot. Nowadays you don't see that happening. Cars don't break down anymore, and we just live in such a different world. It's so different, this world, the world we live in, and it's okay. It's just that back then was definitely raw. You didn't worry too much actually about getting in the car and going and saying, oh, I probably I don't have this, I don't have that. Nowadays people get in an SUV, they pack it with coolers, they pack it with everything, and they're only going for a show overnight or that night or something.
Yeah, it's glamping.
Yeah, glamping and glamp. Jeff, don't get us started on that, right? Man, I mean, the difference between a ticket for a show where you buy a ticket for $6 back in the day, and a show now where you go online and you have every option under the sun to say, do you want this kind of parking? Do you want the glamping? Do you want the VP? Do you want the RV? Do you want it's complicated and it's expensive and it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think you can do the same kind of show after show after show touring that you could back in the day, because, you're going to blow your whole budget on one set of shows versus being like, look, this is what I'm going to do this summer. This is what I'm going to do this spring break. I'm going to hit, three different cities and three sets of shows.
That's a good point.
Yeah, when I did the 81 and 82 summer tours on my motorcycle, which got, well, compared to today's motorcycles, 42 miles to the gallon, which would be bad today, but gasoline was only, 98 cents or something.
Dollar. Yeah.
And I camped half the time, and then, occasionally would stay in a motel, but it was $22. I mean, I could go on the tour and only spend, $600.
Yeah, I don't think
You
people
could go
can
to-
afford. I mean, I don't think the kids today can afford to follow anything. That's why I've interviewed that Goose fan, the young girl Maya, because she's just graduating college and she followed the Goose tour with her boyfriend. But that's the only people who can even do that. And then she was relying on people basically buying her tickets the whole time because the fan base can afford it. I mean, like, the fan base is older, and I think they basically got Miracle the entire thing. But they were like following. But who can else afford that today? Like, I don't know many Gen Zs who could just do that.
No.
Like,
Well, no, not many Gen Z. I mean, it depends. I mean, this is why we've seen such a shift in the data of the demographic of who's going to see shows. Like the Rolling Stones, the last time I saw them was '95, and I thought it was like, well, why am I going to see the Rolling Stones in '95? Since then, they've played how many years? Over and over and over. And who goes to see them? People who are wealthy mostly go to see them, and because you're spending $500 a ticket, and that's cheap. So this is why I think we've seen a change in concert goers in general, and the demographic of who's going. It's it's a conversation about the world in general, but maybe it's a macrocosm of who gets to do things these days. If tickets are so goddamn expensive, who's going, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Erica, you're experiencing that. You see who goes, who doesn't go to some of these shows. The shows that you're going to now, Fish and Dead Cover, like Dead and Company and stuff. Those prices are nuts.
it's expensive. I think it's mostly the original fans, right? Fish, it's like the original fans are now older, and then some of them are bringing their kids, and then there's the odd random person who just decides to go, who just loves music. But I'd say it's generally the original fans. But even things like the mainstream stuff, like Beyonce is so expensive. I know that people were paying like $1,200 to see Beyonce. It's absurd. Like that's like an absurd price to see a concert. So the only concerts that are even attainable for people are going to be the small local cover band. But even that, like we have a venue here and it's mostly cover bands that play, and then some other, it'll be like old bands that used to be famous once that will come through, like the Wallflowers or something, like, and they'll sell, and those tickets will be like $30 to $45. It's not cheap, but it's not expensive, but it's still a choice. Like for most people, that's still going to be like, oh, do I go to this or do I go to that? Like they can't do everything. So that might not be in their budget. And then you have to buy drinks, like, so it ends up being an expensive night. So I think that is a problem, but that's a problem, I think, across anything that became capitalized, right? Like the capitalism, right? It's like, okay, it's like Ticketmaster, anything that producers, because all of music is run by managers and producers, and then event bookers, that's like a whole industry, people who just book event spaces. So everyone wants their cut. So when you're dealing with that, and that's how the bookings even work, because there's booking agents, right? So it's like, okay, now you're dealing with this whole industry and everyone wants their cut. And then the artists don't make money from streams. They make like a 0.0001 cent a stream or something. And so the only way they make money is by going on tour. So therefore they have to sell tickets, and then they only really make money from the merch. So there's like a whole problem in it of itself. But I think young people go to things like Coachella and Outside Lands, like those bigger 3-day festivals like Bonnaroo, because it's like a 3-day thing. It's like an event. It's a social thing. And then you see a bunch of bands at once. And I think that justifies the cost, because you're like, well, I'm going to see 20 bands in 3 days instead of just going to one place, seeing one band, and then traveling another, So I think that's how people probably spend their money more. If you polled like a Gen Z or millennial, it's like, would you rather do this, or just go to Coachella? I think they're going to say Coachella, and not to mention that Coachella is all about Instagram. Like going to Coachella is just about picturing yourself at Coachella to have been there. It's very weird. It's like
it's totally different.
So I told you I'm listening in my interview with her. I'm listening to 3 foreign female rock and roll bands, and when they've come to the States, they're still $40.
That's good. That's affordable.
So I went to see The Warning, who you're supposed to listen to.
I did, and I listened to them last night, and it's coming out. It's out for members now, and it's out.
You like it?
I did. I heard 3. It was from a recent concert, and I heard their first 3 songs, like live.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So I went to see them in South America, except one of them got sick, so the shows were canceled. But that's okay. I had a great time. Chile is a wonderful place, and then I went to Peru, and I went to Machu Picchu. And you're talking about your Instagram thing. So I actually choked up 2 or 3 times at Machu Picchu. Besides the history and the architecture, the actual area is just one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. But everybody is busy. They just were taking pictures the whole time. I'm like, well, you need to put your fucking phone down and experience this awesome place. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just one of the most amazing places I've ever been on this planet.
Well, I did go to a phone-free concert in the last 5 years, and it was Madonna. She actually required you to, like, they took your phones away. They put them in these special bags that lock when you enter, and you can't take out your phone. And because she's Madonna, she's like, no pictures, no videos. So they can do that. They can actually...
Yeah, you can't, in Japan, you're not allowed to do that. It'll throw you out. So the 2 times I've gone to see Band Made in Japan, there's no phones.
Ah, so that's worth going just because they can't hold their phone.
When I went to see Rolling Quartz in Knoxville, it was a tiny place, the band from Korea. This guy's jumping up and down with his phone. I'm like, you realize you're not even going to be able to watch that, right? It's like you're jumping up and down. It's like, just watch the freaking
It's
concert.
nuts to think that so many people are experiencing life through their own screen in real time. I remember there was an interview, George Clooney was once talking about how when he was first famous, people would come up to him and want to like shake his hand and, look at him. And he says now people come up to him and they're literally like, this is their experience. They're experiencing him through their phone.
Oh, they're not even asked to take a selfie. They're just filming him.
Yeah, it's nuts. I remember the biggest distraction, the only distraction you had. Well, okay, I wouldn't say only because there are plenty of distractions, but one of the key distractions back in the day was you always wanted to make sure you had a pen so you could write down the set list on the back of your stub so you could remember what they played so you could go tell your buddies later. And that was sort of like the only not in the moment you had, at least for me, was like writing down the set list.
Oh, because you guys didn't have the internet, so you couldn't look it up online. No, because we're like set list like in real time. We're like, wait, what song is this? And then it's like we can look it up. We can look it up in the moment because people are updating it right away. Like all those set lists and fish.net, they're like up. They're like with it. They're like someone's watching it and just like updating stuff in real time. So
totally. So I don't even bother. Like I won't video. I seldom take a picture. And I don't like try to write down set lists. I'm like, by the time I walk out of here, anything I could have captured and documented is already up there. So unless it's like me and the people I'm with doing a selfie in front of the sphere or like something like that, you know,
which is nice in a way that someone else is taping it now, so you don't have to. And it's nice that you don't have to write the set list because someone else is doing it. So as long as you can still enjoy it in the moment, I think that's good.
Well, I did that back in the 80s. I wasn't one to write the songs down. I was just make sure I get them at the end of the night from my buddy off a matchbook.
Yeah.
So as long as you have the designated person, right? You write the set list. I'm gonna buy the drinks.
You can always find that person who's writing down the name of the tune as the tune starts up. Yeah.
Wow, it's good people kept records because they eventually got put online.
Yeah.
So much has been recorded and documented, and I think that's kind of one of the coolest things about this entire Grateful Dead experience that we had is that so much was documented by the band, the vault, the amount of recording they did. Once they started doing the video stuff in the concerts, you know, for the screens, all of that then became recorded and put into the vault. And so we're kind of lucky that it was like this really little, if you think about it, I mean, I've been not seeing the Dead shows longer than I had been seeing the Dead shows. It's been that far back, but like all that stuff is still there, and that's like really special and unique that it's like readily available and it's substantial.
It is.
They're the most recorded band in history, I believe. I mean, I pretty much think they are the most recorded band, the most recorded audio band in history, and that goes back to the very beginning, which was Owsley. Right, so Owsley was a guy who would record everything, but he was also their sound man. You guys know this, and I think that's, it wasn't just Owsley. Anybody who jumped on their train would be good at recording them, and then all of a sudden, once the crowd, once the fans started recording, they were like, oh, we don't care if they record, and so now you've got hundreds and thousands of tapers that through all of the years that they were active with recordings, and the soundboards and everything else.
And I think that goes back to what Erica said about, today you're getting a fraction of a penny per stream. It's all about touring. The Dead, by virtue of just how reality played out for them, I mean, they joke about it, but the reality is if they could have come up with huge hit albums, they would have happily had number one, triple platinum albums and taken all that money. But the reality was they were about that live experience, and they discovered that they were making the money from being a touring act, and they weren't trying to promote. I mean, the labels wanted them to promote albums, but the reality was, and that's why they were so cool with everybody taping, because they're just like, look, it's out there, it's yours, we've got this community. As long as you keep coming to the shows, that's really what fed their families.
And the reason they were going to the shows, Jeff, is because they were always different.
Yeah.
They weren't what you hear on a record.
Have you heard the Jerry quote about recording the show?
Once it's out there, it's theirs.
We're done with it. Once the show's over, we're done with it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And look what they do now. And now GD Music is Grateful Dead Media is making a good amount of money off of vinyls and reissuing CDs again and all that, the DVDs and stuff. So
there's one other person I'm going to push again. Erica's already heard me say this too many times. Frank Zappa used to record every single one of his concerts. And he would use them he would use a bass line from a Sweden show and mix it with a drum track from an LA show, and then he'd play the guitar over it, and that's what he'd release on his album.
Oh, that's actually really cool and unique.
That's phenomenal. And it wasn't digital.
He recorded every one of his concerts.
Wow.
And it wasn't easy. You were physics. So Erica, I mean, I'm sure you're aware of this, but it's still worth repeating. Like today, everything is digital
Yes.
and you're literally copying and pasting and cutting. But the reason you're pasting and cutting is because it was physical tape.
Right. They had
And and they were physically cutting it and physically taping it.
Yeah,
And
it all been reel to reel.
the amount of tedium to do all that shit was like it just must have taken hours and hours versus pulling an all-nighter and throwing together like a 32 track digital album.
Wow. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, even just when I listen to, I just did all the Beatles albums, and I just think about how did they do this without digital technology? like playing tapes backwards and then cut. You guys were talking about like splicing things, and it's crazy. And that it is cool that they kept the words like copy paste, right? It reminds me of another funny Gen Z thing that they don't know that the save icon on a computer is a floppy disk.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they've never seen a floppy disk. So if you're like, what is the symbol that you press? They're like, oh, the save icon. They don't know that was a
Oh, yeah.
thing. Like
I saw a meme of it's like, yeah, I gave my kid a floppy disk and they said, oh, cool, someone 3D printed the save icon.
Yeah, that was real.
No,
Like that. So it's just funny that like the idea that like we use the term copy paste on computer. It's because we actually did have to like copy things and then actually like stick them together. And now if they could have come up with a better term, if it had been originated in a computer, it would have been something else. But it's like copy paste, right? It's like the same thing. So it's interesting the genesis of words and stuff like that. Okay, I'm gonna do some random questions and then we can go back to natural. Okay, so are you guys pro or con Donna?
Pro. Not every single show, every single moment, but as a concept, pro.
I'm pro.
Yeah, I'm a pro Donna person. I think that here's the thing is we all listen to the Dead today, and I'm sure you guys listen to a mix just like I do. You one day a little bit of '60s, one day a little '70s, one day a little '80s, '90s, whatever. And the honest the God truth is that she's not in a lot of stuff. I mean, she was active for a good amount of time, but she wasn't always in every song.
No,
And
she would kind of float off stage.
She would float off stage.
And
She
just
would
come back
she'd
in
be
when
in the
people
background sometimes. It was when she had her moments, and we all know this on songs like Playing in the Band, where she just like go a little too far out,
Yeah.
So that's
one
where
thing
she and that's where she got her, that's where she
But
got
something
her.
like Scarlet Begonias, she was a beautiful mix, and Phil was still singing. If you look 73 and 74, so it was 4-part harmony sometimes.
Yeah.
And Phil's voice was okay back then. I mean, eventually it became a little rough, but she was that high harmony they needed.
Yeah.
You have to listen to the right songs, Erica, and you'll realize.
Erica, historically she was a singer back with. Oh, sorry, Robert, go ahead.
That's okay. Well, you can call me Bob. My sister-in-law, which I don't really listen to their studio albums hardly ever. But there are 2 songs on Shakedown Street, which one of them they never played and one they only played twice. But the song France, very different song for the Grateful Dead. She's beautiful in that song.
Yeah.
And then the song If I Had a World to Give, which is a Jerry Love song. They only played twice. I don't know why. It's a beautiful song.
And I think Sunrise.
Sunrise was on Terrapin.
Oh, Sunrise was on Terrapin.
Yeah. And then
They also didn't have monitors and in-ear monitors, so her ability to hear what the others, and I've seen her say this in interviews, her ability to hear what the others were singing and try to match it in a really loud live environment was particularly challenging. But what I think Rex was about to say is, she sang backup for Elvis. I mean, she came from a real musical. Yeah.
Right. So she's got a history.
She sang backup on hundreds of records.
Yeah, no, she was the real deal. And Eric, if you haven't heard the story of how Keith wound up in the band, let me ask first. Have you?
Well, wasn't
ever
that
heard...
in the documentary where she was the one that contacted the band and said, "My husband's a pianist, and like you should hear him play"? And then they went up after a show or something, and then they're like, "Oh, we need a keyboardist."
Totally.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, That's always a, so that means the wife was more ambitious than the husband, though.
Oh,
You know what I mean? That always creates problems. If the wife
That
has
wouldn't
bigger,
surprise me.
right? Like I'm saying, that's the wife. You don't want to be the woman creating jobs for your husband, like he's your son. Like, oh my husband, he plays keyboard. Like you should listen
but he was
to him.
so good.
I know, but
But the
he
universe
wasn't
did it.
self-advocating, I guess. So she had to do it.
No, but we all benefited from the fact that she filled in that gap, and he would have still been working. Was he like at the phone company? I don't remember where the hell he was working, but or maybe she was the one at the phone
Post
company.
office, maybe. That was Phil, too.
Phil was at
Yeah.
the post
That's
office.
crazy. It's like such a weird thing. I guess what's interesting, because now that I've learned and I've been on this journey and I've heard so many things and I've gone through the eras a lot, they are so unique because they had so many eras. Remember how like Jeff's email was laid out in eras to me, and that really helped break it down. But even just like, I want to talk about Pigpen now, because today I saw a meme. What was the meme? It's like, oh, did you ever hear Jerry? They're like, I heard Pigpen or something. It was like overheard at the Sphere or something. It's like, oh, did you ever get to hear Jerry? And then
Before we,
someone's like, oh, yeah,
before we before we get into Pigpen, I just want to say for your last question was that Donna, I'm pro Donna because let me say, Keith was my favorite pianist. Keith was my favorite keyboard player of the band, and I know a lot of people talk about that. You know, who's your favorite keyboard player? Sometimes Keith he's just left out in the way back there. So a lot of people don't even think of him. But I know that 74 is my favorite year, and everything that he did from the moment he came in to the moment he checked out. I mean, I think he brought a lot to that band that carried over from to the day that Jerry kicked.
Yeah, he put a great jazz element between the guitars and the bass.
Yeah.
He was great. I'd have to say he was probably my favorite. I really liked Brent. I thought he brought a good energy, but Keith was a better pianist.
And what were Keith's
Absolutely.
years? Give me the sandwich.
72 to 79.
Okay, so not that long in the grand scheme of things,
But a
an
really
important
pivotal.
period.
But it was such that pivotal period, like the 72 to 79, like that was such an incredible creative period for them, both in terms of the songs that they cranked out that became permanent parts of the repertoire. But then
The book she has.
it was just some amazing. It's when they were like really jazzy and really funky and did all this exploration, not like the acid rock exploration, but just like really this musical exploration with different styles. And in fact, as a Brent, I showed up in '85. Brent had already been there for 6 years at that point. I would just think, oh, how cool it would have been to have seen Keith, because a lot of the tapes I listened to were '70s shows with Keith, and it wasn't until long after Brent was gone that I really appreciated what I had when I had it. Because I don't know, but at least for me, like, I was so focused on, oh gosh, it would have been great to hear them in the '70s, that it sort of got in my way, I guess, of sort of enjoying certain aspects of it at the time. It really wasn't until Brent was gone and I'm listening to Vince, who I mean, you don't want to speak ill of the dead, but pun intended, I guess, but wasn't a huge fan. Hornsby, on the other hand, brought back a little bit of that Keith sound because he played a grand
Absolutely.
piano, and it was a very lush filled, if you think about sort of Hornsby's style of piano, it didn't have like the beer hall sound that Keith would sometimes do, but it did have that many broad chords and movement throughout.
But
Yeah.
he was part of the reason I really liked that Europe '90 tour.
Yeah.
Hornsby. I
That was
actually
just
talked
listening.
about that. I didn't talk about Vince Welnick, and I won't talk negative either, but he was definitely my least favorite keyboard player.
Yeah. Erica, in the interview that we did, Erica, you asked a question about Jerry and the periods that he went through, and maybe the '80s, and something to the effect of, well, did you see that he was fading? Did you what were people saying? Was there a moment where you would all of a sudden say, oh man, the band's just kind of disintegrating? My answer was, well, Jerry would have a bad moment or a bad night every once in a while. But then all of a sudden, it would just be he'd go on stage and he'd have a phenomenal night, better than a '72 night. Who knows? Whatever, So it could be all over the place. But I'm glad you mentioned 1990 because he had his problems in the '80s, and then he got better. And you know,
He
I was
cleaned
just
up for a
listening.
couple
I
of
was
years.
just listening to something in the '90s. I forget if it was something from 1990, and I mean, shit, it was amazing. It was just, you know, 90 was a really great year. So there was even moments in '93 when Jerry would have a really good night, you know, that kind of thing. So he was consistent. He wasn't like a burnout band. They weren't like a burnout band where, you know, they just keep going every year to get the crowds in and to get people to, you know, to nostalgically come. You know, I heard that the band Triumph, I think, is touring again. I'm not sure, but so I guess I had to throw that in there. You know, but
Okay, and then this is a follow. It kind of is related. So then, who was the weakest link? And it could be for different eras, but which band member was the weakest link at various times where you thought it was really bringing the band down?
Vince
If there
Wilnick.
is one, it could be a trick question. Maybe no
yeah,
one's the weakest
Vince
link.
Wilnick.
I just have the one, and it's Vince, and it was just a
yeah,
bummer
we
for
all
him
agree on
too.
that. Yeah.
So that's
He
an easy
came in.
question.
Well, it's a tough. I mean, if you think about it, he shows up so late in the game. There's already been. By the way, Erica, if you have you seen Spinal Tap?
No.
All right, it's a mockumentary. It's a mock documentary about a fake heavy metal band. But the one of the running gags in it is that they've gone through like six drummers who have all died in weird ways. One spontaneously combusted on stage, another one was in accident. The Dead went through like six keyboard players. I mean, so it was a really hot seat to be put into, in part because of the history behind it, but also for Vince, he's showing up so late in the game that the fans, I'm sure, did not embrace him. So you've got that. I mean, even Brent was like depressed because he'd read one bad thing and he'd be like, I'm still the new guy, even though he had been with the band for 10 years. So I think it was a tough spot to be dropped into. And from everything I heard, even just from a compensation perspective, they were all operating on very different financial incentives. But I think so I think Vince was the weak link, but he had a tough role to go into. I mean, at least Hornsby showed up as just some fun side gig. He was an established act, an artist, and these were people he had played with. He played in Dead cover bands as a kid, and so he was kind of having this childhood fantasy playing out of playing in the band that he and his brothers used to do a cover band of.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
really interesting. Oh, I have another follow-up question. Okay, so Jeff, you were just saying how you were so focused in the 80s about being sad about missing the 70s that you almost missed the 80s. like,
Yeah.
like, does anyone else have that experience? Like, do you know, like this FOMO of the past, like something you could have known? Because I think what's interesting is I can imagine that, like, you find, well, look, I'm just finding out about fish, right? I'll use fish as an example, right? So, like, I'm coming in and there's all this lore and there's all this years and I'm just learning about things. And now I just found out about Coventry, which was 2004 when they broke up. They were like, this is our last show because Trey's an addict and everything's falling apart. And it was like a disaster. And it was apparently, like, documentary worthy, like, muddy and everyone was crying and people just left their tents and it was terrible. So now I'm just finding out about it as like kind of like history, but I don't know. I try to just take it for the now. I try not to be like, oh no, I missed out on it. So I don't know. Do you think that was like unique to you, or do you think other Dead people like lament on like, if I had only been a little older, if I had just been there in like 69 or something like.
there was a there's a romanticism that is wrapped into the whole experience because it came out of something of substantial meaning historically and culturally, that it's awesome that you can plug into this thing that's this living beast, but it is anchored in a history that I know. I mean, I sort of overstated the Brent thing, but the reality was, it's like it would have been so cool, like 73, 74. Those are my years. I love those years, and it's like I would have given anything to have just been dropped in for one show in the 70s because it's, you romanticize it, and it's just the thing that you can't have.
So for me, it was if I had a
Time
little
machine.
wish list, I would have loved to have been on the Europe '72 tour.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
But did it, and Pig was still there. He died the next year. Um, but I was lucky enough to see Keith and Donna 7 times. Um, but I liked Brent, and shit happens,
Yeah.
and it moved forward, and it didn't. Oh, I wish it was. I never had that. Oh, I wish it was the way it was thing. But um, until until Vince,
There we go. All right.
I think that Jeff, you said the right thing. There's a romanticism about that swirls about the '60s, which is where they started, and they basically invented that type of music, certain type of music at that time. But that blended in with a lot of other 60s generation, the 68, 67, 69, well, 69, it was dead. But I think that in the psychedelic era of San Francisco in the late 60s, mid 60s, that was a moment that I think a lot of people wish they could transport back to. And it's not just because of the Grateful Dead. I think there was a lot of other things going on, and it was an awakening, and all that. So I think, if anything, that probably would have been in my thoughts when I was young, after I had seen my first show or a couple of shows. I probably would have thought, oh, it would have been great to. But the older I get now, I'm like, oh, that was a shit show back then too. Was it?
yeah,
The mid '60s and the late '60s was a shit show. I mean, if you lived in San Francisco during that time, you enjoyed it, but you enjoyed it for a couple of years, for a finite period of time, and then all of a sudden you woke up one day when you weren't stoned, and you go, holy shit, what's going on around here? This is a mess.
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
That's why the band moved up to Marin, in part because San Francisco kind of became a little rougher, and not that I had an issue with roughness, but like getting out of the city and all the crap that comes with it, and just having space. I mean, that's the whole Americana thing. They were in Marin riding horses and shooting guns and having this sort of Wild West. I don't want to call it cosplay, but they were having this kind of Americana adventure, and were writing. That was the kind of music they were writing, and the world they were envisioning was, like we talked about Cumberland blues, and how, it just sounds so old timey that there's someone had said, I remember reading once, that Hunter was at a show, didn't know he was right, the lyricist didn't know he was right there, and someone said, oh yeah, could you imagine if the guy who wrote this song way back in the 1800s heard the Grateful Dead playing this,
And
not
that's
knowing
what
the
I
right
said when
word.
I was folding my clothes. I go, I wonder, it's like, it makes me wonder, like, is this original? I had to ask. I was like, or was this like a, folk cover, right? So, because that's what it implied. It did a really good job of doing that.
Totally,
It did
it just
it.
transported you to this
Yeah.
world
It
of,
was very well written in that way, where it's like, okay, write a song in the style of, it's like a la, right? It's like straight up like, he understood the assignment. Okay, that's what we would say today. Like, he understood the assignment. So like, it was like literally like A+ for like mimicking Americana, right? Like, to make it sound like it's old. It was done very well, and even just the style of lyrics. So that was my initial reaction too. So I thought that was really cool.
should do a Woody Guthrie song.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I actually and I interviewed a millennial that's coming out soon, because like someone asked, they're like, "Are you going to interview a Gen Z? Are you
I
going
did
to?"
ask you.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I am. So the millennial interview is coming out, and I think I guess, to kind of expand on this idea of a few things you guys said. One was the most tape band of all time. Everything is documented. Everything was archived. Because of that, the younger fans who were not there are able to experience it. Like, they're able to watch it. Maybe they weren't there physically, but they're playing through the shows now, and they're able to hop on the bus as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not only that, there's a lot of young bands. Your channel has to do with jam bands and the succession after the Dead ended in '95, and all these bands that were so related and came up with being inspired by the Grateful Dead and that kind of music. And there's tons of it now, and a lot of it are really young guys and girls and young people, and they're hitting, they're playing at small bars in Brooklyn and all in suburbs and everywhere, and it's amazing. I dig it. I think it's great.
Yeah, it is, and it's continuing. So it's just interesting to see that, and as long as it's just the gatekeepers, right? There's still the gatekeepers. Like, I gave you 3 chances. This is the 3rd video I've tuned in of you, and you still don't get the dead. You're never going to get the dead. I'm blocking you. I was like, okay, like, whoa there, buddy. Like, like, really? Like, it's like so weird that it's unfortunate that there's some deadheads who have that kind of relationship where if you, they're both like, you weren't there, so you can't get it. But then they're also like, oh, maybe she'll get it. But then, oh, you don't get it, so I'm blocking you. It's like, well, no, I do. And now I'm singing all the time. I'm randomly singing, like, I Know You Writer, just randomly. Like, I'll just, like, random sing it. That one gets stuck in my head a lot. And then I was singing Jack Straw. It just kind of, like, went in my head. And then sometimes I'll just sing Ripple, but I can't remember the first half of it. I only remember the chorus. So, like, it's coming into, like, now it's just kind of, like, becoming part of me. Like, it's not... like, I don't have to think about it. I don't have to be like, oh, let me put on a Grateful Dead song. It's like, now I'm like, oh, I know that song. And it's really cool. So, like, I just had to, like, let it sit for a while, and I had to process. And also, I'm a slow to warm person. Like, that was my personality since I was a child. And I know because I raised, my daughter is slow to warm. So it's basically like, you're very skeptical. You're kind of the person that, like, dips your toe in the pool first, and then you see if it's, you know, like, I'm like that. I have to, like, kind of put a toe in, then I maybe come back and put a foot, and then I'm like, okay, now I'm ready to get in the water. Some people just jump in water. Like, that's
Yeah,
not
but you're
me.
doing a journey. But think about this. You're doing a journey in weeks that most of us did over years, right? Of just, you know, or at least an entire, you know, couple years to start getting familiarized with the music and discovering it. You're doing
I
this from a
absolutely
fire
have to take this
hose.
phone call.
It's fine. I can pause for a second. I can also, like, mute him. Hold on. Okay, I muted him. Okay, he's muted. We can continue. Yeah.
So yeah, and I think the other piece, which so there's 2 other thoughts. One is you're also only experiencing this purely from the music perspective, not the experiential, and and part of this whole thing that drew us all in was the music and the experience, kind of all of this brought together. And you're doing this like right there where you're sitting working through the catalog. And then the other thing that I'd say about the people is, you know, look, Deadheads are just kind of a microcosm of the real world in which there are plenty of assholes. I hate to admit that, like, you know, that the Deadhead scene isn't this like universal peace loving I mean, you've just got assholes. I mean, they always existed. You'd have people who would sit and shit talk the band while they were at shows. I mean, I have friends who I would look at and be like, dude, if you're gonna sit and complain about every show, then why have you gone to all, like, what's your deal? So you've just got to ignore these people, because at the end of the day, this is your journey, and you're going to meet some awesome people in the process, and you're already starting to synthesize the musical bits and pieces, like the thought of having a call and response between singing a line and then having a lick, and then singing a line and having a lick. All these little things are like Lego bricks that you're able to kind of use and put together for your own purpose going forward.
Yeah, it's great. It's just, and yeah, I mean, I think if I listen back to the first things I heard, I may think of them differently now, but I still don't think I like Eyes of the World. Like, I just don't.
We'll get you one that you do.
I need to find one that I like. I didn't like the one I listened to, but I do want to hear another Help Slip Franklin, because yeah.
August 1st, 1975, Great American Music Hall.
Yes, that's the one. That's the one I put on your list.
Okay, so that's going to be one of my next reactions, because
it's so good, and it's very it's such a great recording that it sounds like it's the album, but it has a live component to it.
It was super tight at the time.
Because they had just recorded, because it was right then. That was still right when the album had been just produced. And as far as Eyes of the World go, so the Grateful Dead movie that I'm sure we've all talked about with you is going to be in theaters August 13, 14, and 15.
Okay.
So there is a scene where they play Eyes of the World. Yep. And 2 things happen that are noteworthy, other than the fact that it's a great tune. And in 73, 74, they had a particular jam that they stopped doing, but it was this really cool jam. The first thing is they cut to the lobby, and you see these 2 Deadheads getting a weird argument. And that sort of became a kind of a running joke for anyone who's seen that. So you'll see it and you'll realize it. But the other thing is there's this jam that's really intense. and they cut to this girl in the audience, and she is dancing like her life depends on it, and she's like so into this that you realize that's how I feel about that jam, and she's like physically embodying it. That may get you more interested in Eyes of the World to hear like that
Okay,
74
I'll listen to that
super,
one because I now found my China Cat Sunflower Rider that I was like, I like this. And I was like,
the Europe 72 one, right?
no, the one I just
Now she
did
just listened to it.
yesterday.
Yeah,
No,
she just listened to it. Was it 74?
I think so.
Yeah.
Providence?
All right, I got to get caught up.
Providence 74, I think. Yeah, that was why I was like, this is even
Yeah.
better than Europe 72. And I was like, that's my thing. Okay, so then I'll find this because I want to like help Slip Franklin. I just thought 89 was
That's
not it. I was like,
No, well,
That
it's 89.
75 one is it, and it's got this great introduction from Bill Graham, and as he's introducing the band, each instrument is coming in as he introduces the musician's
cool.
name, and then it just goes into it. It's like perfect. You couldn't have timed it
oh
better.
yeah, I'm gonna love that. And that'll be a really
There's
good
a
video because then all the
Great
deadheads will love
music.
it.
Great music never stopped. Great It Must Have Been the Roses.
Oh,
Great
so
Sugaree and a great Eyes of the World at that same concert, 75 at the Great American Music Hall.
Okay, maybe I have to do the whole show then. It'll be great. Okay, so do you want to talk about Pigpen now?
let's do it.
Okay, so what do we think? I mean, he died young, I guess. I mean, do you think the band would have gone in a different direction had he not died? And would that have been the wrong direction? Or like,
They'd already started going in a
Yeah.
different direction, and so there were kind of two directions happening at the same time. He was not a he wasn't into LSD, and everybody else was. He was a hard drinking guy, and so his tunes were these bluesy, very. I mean, they do extended jams, and he'd do a rap where he'd just start introducing people in the audience to each other, and it was like really a lot of fun. But they'd then go off and do their trippy shit, and he'd sit back. And so there was already that departure from the path they were on that I don't think was his vibe. I don't know, guys, what your take is.
Go ahead, Robert.
All right. I can agree with that. And I don't know really, but it seemed like he was, I don't know if he was getting depressed or what, but he was drinking more and more and his liver failed. I think if he would have stayed alive, he probably would have stayed in the band, but I think they still would have added a keyboard player because, like I said last time, he wasn't a great keyboard player, but he was, a decent guitar player, harmonica, had an interesting voice. I liked Pigpen. But it was maybe just one of those things that was destiny. He was, it's hard to say, but I like that era. But you're right, in '70, the direction changed, and maybe he would have gone along. But I think, well, he was still alive when they added Keith and Donna.
Yeah.
So that band could have gone on, and he would have had some moments where he shined and some moments where he sat back, kind of like Donna did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Pig was he was a spiritual member of that band. Like since the very, he and Jerry were best friends before they even started the Dead, right? So before they started the Warlocks, when they were doing the Jug Champions,
Uptown,
yeah, the Uptown Jug Champions. So they were buddies from the age of 14, 13, something like that. And Jerry was in awe of the blues spirit, the natural organic blues spirit that Pigpen had. And they fed off of each other in those early years as kids. And Pig had a certain, he was a certain kind of personality. He was not a real outgoing guy, but he was really knowledgeable about the kind of music that he loved, which was blues and folk and that kind of thing. Jerry loved it. He loved it. I think there's no way. I think that's why everybody spoke so fondly of Pig, all the band members, Bob and Phil and everybody that knew him. He was just, Pigpen was a great guy. Pigpen was a cool dude. He was more that he brought more to the Dead and more to any kind of the music that the band did over any period of time, any year. Through that, his vibe was there and his vibe was great, and that's what they needed. That's what they needed for a certain period of time. And then when they started musically expanding, he wasn't really expanding with them in a lot of ways. but there was no way they would dump him. They would never got rid of him, and I certainly don't think that that's why he took to the bottle as badly as he did. But there was reasons for that. So he went his way, and you know, like I said, like you guys said, they took on Keith. They knew they were going to need a keyboard player, and they were missing that element, so they brought him on. They got so much out of Pigpen now. And by the way, Tom Constantine, we haven't talked about him, right? So that's another keyboard player to add to the list. What was he, about a year and a half he was in the band, maybe even less or something like that?
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
on the live Dead.
Yeah, he was on,
He was an interesting keyboard player.
he was a classical keyboard, still today, still alive.
Yeah,
He thwarted death by leaving the band, I think.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes, so
That's
there
why
was
he's
another.
alive.
Yeah, that's why he's alive. He's still doing shows. He's still playing. Classically trained. Very good friend of Phil's, I believe. And yeah, he's still carrying on that Grateful Dead torch.
Okay, I have a dual question, so you can each answer this. It's just an opinion-based question. Okay, so what is your favorite, or what you think is the best, offshoot band that has at least a member, like an actual member of Grateful Dead in it? Okay, so like that could be any type of offshoot that has one of the members. I'm not gonna say original because the band changed members throughout time. And the second question is your favorite. What is the best purely Grateful Dead cover band that's just like a cover band? So it's a dual question. It's like, what's your favorite offshoot group, and then who's the best Grateful Dead cover band in the world right now? That's not like actually
Right.
the Dead.
I'd say for the first question, for me, it's probably Dead and Company because we mentioned it was the sort of the Jerry slot. There became a center of gravity sound wise that wasn't there in a lot of the other iterations leading up to it. I enjoyed Phil and Friends, but that was a completely different experience. So I'd say that. But I did see a band called Go Ahead in the mid 80s that was it was Bobby, Brent, and Billy. So you basically had the singer, lead, rhythm guitarist, you had the keyboard player, and you had one of the drummers. And they did a little couple mini tours in between Dead tours. And the reason that was so much fun was it was like in a small theater. We were like on the rail, like we were just right up there on the stage harassing Bobby, which was really, looking back on it, not particularly nice of us, but we just kept insisting on more cowboy tunes. We were just obsessed with that. But that was, I'd say for me as an intimate thing, it was that. But overall, Dead and Company. And then your second question was.
Just any cover band you've heard like that does the Dead, like.
Yeah, so in the 90s, I moved back home to Chicago, and there was a band that played in a bar once a month up the street from us called Dark Star Orchestra, and their thing would be they would play a particular show in its entirety, and you'd get there. Also, it was really disgusting because it was before cigarettes were illegal. So the entire place, it was an indoor place that just reeked of cigarettes. So I'd come home and it was just gross. But you'd look at the stage and you'd look at what mics were set up and you'd count the mics and start figuring out, okay, well, there's going to be a Donna person. So we know we're in the 70s. And then they'd start playing songs and you'd try to figure out which show are we listening to. And the Jerry. I can't think of the guy's name. He went off, but we used to call him Fake Jerry. He was really good at like nailing the Jerry sound for the particular era that they happened to choose that night.
Huh, that's really intense. Like to do a whole show. So, okay, now
Yeah,
the other
that guy's name was John Kadlecek.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yep.
Okay, now you guys have had time to think about your favorite offshoot band, and it could be the past, the current, whatever, all of all
Go ahead,
time.
Chris.
Or the future, if you've got a sense of where it's going to go.
Yeah, well, there will be the future. There's so many all the time. You know, I'll start off by saying, have you guys heard of Michaela Davis? Michaela Davis is she is a harp player, big ass harp.
I think I saw her on TikTok actually. That name sounds
Probably
familiar.
has. She's young. She's
Yeah,
young.
like she plays harp on TikTok. Yeah.
She plays harp, and she's trained in a lot of different styles of music, I'm sure. She went to school for it and a whole bit, but she's got a band that she plays with, and they play all Dead covers, Dark Star, you know, um, you name it, To Lay Me Down, all sorts of things, And when I was like, wow, I went to see her at the Bowery Ballroom with Circles Around the Sun, which is another Grateful Dead inspired band. And it was just amazing. She had a great band, but she is amazing what they could do with a harp, what she could do with a harp, and so that's an example and she's not always playing Grateful Dead covers. She's also been asked to come on stage and play with Bob a number of times, with Phil, I think once, a couple of years ago. And so this community that they've created, including like Phil's son, Graham, it's so extensive now. It's so interwoven with musicians that used to play here, used to play there, used to be in a Dead band. You just mentioned John Kedlachak. He was one of I think he was maybe the original guitarist for Dark Star Orchestra. DSO has been around for such a long time, and they have always been the premier, and they are still going. And Jeff Mattson, who's the guitarist now, is fantastic. And so a lot of people would say, oh, they're the best at what they do as far as recreating the sound of the Dead. But J-Rad is the Russo band. There's so many, and it's hard for me to say. I mean, I think I'm probably going to go see Dark Star Orchestra soon. I forget where they're playing around here soon. But there was the Zen Tricksters there. So it's hard to say which is the best Dead cover band. And I'm going to send you guys a link to the old band Timberwolf, because Jeff, when you sent me that reminder about Englishtown tribute, whatever that was, Englishtown Project, I was like, oh, well, I definitely have to send you the link that they have a recording from a bar back in 78, 79 on Long Island. And it sounds amazing. It is like really well recorded. The sound is recorded well. They even have a Donna, the lead guitarist, and this girl who's in the band, where they were dating at the time. Randy, who was the lead guitarist at the time. I grew up on Long Island, so I knew these guys because my older brothers knew the band, and one of my brothers did the backdrop. He painted a backdrop of a big wolf playing cards. And they used that all the time, every time they played. And anyway, he was such a great guitarist, and I'll send you the link. And it's like amazing, and his improvising was amazing too, really great. And he could have gone on, but I believe he hung up his guitar and he became some kind of like astrophysicist. He was going to school at the time, some kind of heavy duty deep science, and anyway, he went in that route. I'm not sure if he plays guitar to this day. So so there's still so many, and it's interwoven, as I said, and still these musicians. I love how these days they're getting guests, that they're creating bands that the members of this band are getting together and doing a couple of shows, and then later on you'll see different members of different bands creating other bands, and this can go on forever. It's fractals just connecting to each other all the time. So I guess that's what I would say. There's so many bands other than Grateful Dead cover bands, which there are so many. I would say that, and there's so many inspired bands outside of that don't cover Grateful Dead bands. It's almost hard to tell anymore how many there are. You can see really great bands, and then all of a sudden you find out later that Jerry was this guy's favorite guitarist, that kind of thing. So it's a hard one to answer, but it goes on forever. So a long list, really.
Okay. And what about your favorite offshoot?
Oh, the favorite offshoot. Well, that's kind of what I was saying, is that
they're all offshoots. You're saying they're all offshoots.
They're
so even if they weren't,
they really are.
What about the ones with the original member though? Like I'm saying, like a Jerry Garcia band,
Okay. I guess I didn't know. Well, of the Grateful
Like
Dead
of
members, which was the
which
best?
band formed, like which was your favorite band that formed from one of the original members at any time? So like for
Oh,
Oh, then
Garcia
I'd say
band for sure.
JGB, Jerry
Oh,
Garcia.
it's Garcia band for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
he had it nailed, and any member of the Grateful Dead would tell you the same.
okay, fine. Good. And I want Bob's answer now to both questions. Maybe this will be shorter.
So I
Sorry.
wouldn't have considered offshoot bands why the Dead still existed from your question. That's not how I would have taken it.
Okay.
Of course, it's Jerry Band,
Okay.
but that would not have been my original answer.
Okay.
And I did like Go Ahead too, but the Dead existed. So I'm gonna go post Grateful Dead.
Okay. Yes. Post dead. Then I guess.
So my initial answer would have been Phil Lesh and Friends, the Quintet, because I liked their not sounding just like Jerry, but playing Grateful Dead songs with Phil. I was very inspired by them. Plus, I like the guitar players. Um, I happen to not be a Dark Star Orchestra fan. They kind of creep me out for some reason. Although Kadalick, or you probably say his name right, um, was in a band called Further with Bobby and Phil, and I did like Further
Yeah.
more than I like Dead and Company. Um, I don't know what it is about Dead and Company. It's just the big production and like I said before when we were talking before, they're like a caricature of the Grateful Dead.
Well,
So
And it's a lot slower.
I
I've
like
struggled with
Further.
the
I like
tempo.
Further better. But
well, it's hard
it's
once the
still
Messiah
the quintet.
dies. It's hard to follow on. I'm saying like when you've lost the
Yeah,
Messiah, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
in a
yeah,
way,
yeah.
if Jerry was the Messiah for people and he was going to save the world, and
The
then once
guy
he's dead, it
he wasn't.
becomes like a new religion. So I'm saying Dead and Co is kind of like the we've lost our savior. What do we do now? It's like, oh wait, form a new band, quick, put a new front man, like get them to
Well,
follow.
they did a tour called The Dead with Warren Haynes was their guitar player,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
the 50th anniversary, Trey was their guitar player.
And they did
Um,
Further.
and I like both those guitar players, but those were not my favorite shows.
I mean, two things
Agreed.
can be
So
true at
I have
once.
no Grateful Dead cover band that I'm going to say is the best one, except maybe I'll say the Dead Beats that I was in the early 80s.
Okay, okay. That's a cute name. Like if you were gonna yeah, that's actually really good. That'd be a funny topic. Like what would be a really good name for a Grateful Dead cover band that hasn't existed yet? Because you know how like Dark Star Orchestra, oh, that makes sense. Like Dead Beats, that's a good name. If you guys were gonna make
Yeah,
a
but
new band.
I was in college at ASU, and it was a little side
Smart.
thing.
Yeah,
I told you before,
what
like
would
a
we
college
call a new
party name.
band? We have to be clever now. It's like puns. What would you call a new band? And
Well, there is a tribute band called Jerry's Middle Finger.
Yeah, I've seen them.
Mhm.
oh,
Yeah.
because he was missing his finger.
Yeah.
That's kind of
I was missing his
dark.
finger.
It's kind of
Yeah.
dark, but I like
Yeah,
it. It's we like dark humor.
accidentally cut off with an axe.
Uh huh.
And they're fantastic. They're an excellent band. And yeah, so and I think it's endless the amount of names because of their catalog
Yeah.
and the community itself. I think it could almost be endless the amount of creative things you can come up with
Yeah.
for
No,
names.
I love Chris's perspective because you see I think it's based on your personality type, but you see everything as continuity. Like you see like big strings connecting the universe, you know? So it's like it's how your mind works. I'm kind of similar. Like there's like a web and time exists, but it's like you're seeing the Grateful Dead is not just it's like this whole entire organism that's emerged, and I think that's
Oh
true.
yeah.
I mean, they changed they changed music forever. And it wasn't just music, they changed the scene. They created this whole concert thing, the touring. I mean, it's bigger than the Dead. It's so big that they couldn't stop the machine. And I don't know, that's the thing is everyone's like, oh, well, Jerry, we talked about all this. Like, okay, should Jerry have stopped and gone to rehab? Did they push too far? Could he have lived longer? But the reality is he wasn't going to quit. There was a machine running and things just had to happen the way they happened, I guess. Like, sadly.
So
Yeah.
Stu Allen in the Bay Area has a band called Mars Hotel,
Sounds
Yeah.
familiar.
and they
Yeah.
play small venues.
Yeah.
And he's not doing it on purpose, but I guess I'll pick his band. He plays the same amp and speaker unit as he did in the 70s. Uh, he has a really beautiful Jerry feel without trying to mimic Jerry.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I think if we're gonna mention that, then yeah, I mean that's what I mentioned to Erica when I spoke to her, was that, everybody, a lot of people love John Mayer's in the Dead and Company, and I give him a lot of credit for the amount of discipline it took him to get to this point. I didn't like his music prior, and so there's a lot of things that I don't get the feel. I don't get the same feel that I do from Mayer from than so many other guys like a Stu Allen. I'll take a Stu Allen over him any day. I'll take a Stu Allen over a lot of people any
I like
day
Stu.
if I see a cover band. But Erica, you asked about the ongoing nature of it, just keeps folding into it over and over and over, and that's I don't see any way it can stop at this point. There's people that are covering fish now,
Yeah.
but even though even though there's people that are covering fish and offshoots from fish, that still came from the mothership, right? The Grateful Dead.
So who would you then say, if we go back in time, who do we pick as the influences that influence the Dead? Because you know how it comes from, they all had different backgrounds, the band members. Because we have to come up with the genesis of the Dead. Who do we owe their homage to?
That's endless too.
Right. So
Yeah, it is part of this large stream you're talking about.
yeah, I'm just trying to continue it. We have to go, because you have to look forward. You have to look back. So it's
Yeah.
it's only fair, because it's because that's the problem, is we get so obsessed with one thing, and then we get romanticized, like this was the best thing that ever happened, and nothing ever good happened before, and nothing this good will happen in the future,
No,
and it
that's,
can't be true.
Yeah, and they didn't
that's just not
subscribe
true.
to that either. I mean,
Yeah.
they talked about the stuff they'd listened to as kids in the Bay Area, and they'd be hearing like country western coming out of the radio out of like Fresno or wherever, and then they'd hear, you know,
Miles Davis.
Miles Davis. That was Bill Graham hooked them up with Miles Davis. That was another thing, is Bill Graham, the concert producer, would like pair them up with acts that in a million years you'd never be like, oh, let's put those together. But they totally made sense. They'd influence each other. But they were all like, a lot of the Americana stuff goes back to the stuff they grew up with. A lot of the folk stuff is stuff that they grew up with. A lot of like, there was a lot of like the Ray Charles stuff. I mean, it was just a
A
real,
big jazz influence.
yeah.
Okay.
And
Oh,
I don't know if Jerry ever really listened to B.B. King, and their styles are not the same, but what they do, which is why I like both of them, which is one of the reasons I really love Jerry, his leads, like hard rock is more rhythm and just speed technique. Jerry sings the melody on his guitar. And
Yeah.
to me, and B.B. King did that before him, and I'm sure somebody did that
and I
before
like
him.
that. I think Trey does that too. That's
Yeah.
the first thing that got me to like Fish, when I was like, oh, he's just singing he's just, because I'm a singer. So I
Yeah,
identify,
he's
like
not
when
just playing
violinists
rhythms and
play,
showing how fast he is. He's
yeah, no, when
singing the melody on the
violinists
guitar.
emulate the voice, it's the best. It's when
Yeah, it's like
violinists try their whole life to make it sound like a voice. That's what good guitarists are doing. It's singing. It's not just playing electric guitar. It's like you're trying to sing the melody. But yeah, I have an interesting question, by the way. If you guys have any other closing thoughts on this topic,
No.
let me know. Okay.
Go
I
for
have
it.
we're almost done, and I do have one question for everybody before
Oh,
we go.
okay. So I have a question. This is more like, okay, as we get older in our lives, and we have to like think about what kind of legacy we want to leave, whatever. My question would be, what would you want all the new young people who's discovered the Dead to know about from your experience? Like it could be like a story from the road, maybe like a story of meeting a member, or like an experience, like, because that's what I really want to capture in recording these, is that it's like documenting history. It's like one day there'll be someone, like, what would you impart about someone that they won't ever know unless you tell that? Like a story that, like, if someone, like, oh wow, I would have never known that, right? Like, because you can watch the documentary on Amazon, but not that kind of stuff. I want to know if there's something we should know to really understand the Dead, or something about what you went through that will help someone have a cool memory or something. I don't know. It's kind of really open
Well,
question.
when I saw Jerry Garcia Band at the Stony Brook Gym on Long Island in shit, I don't know what, it might have been 79, something like that. Anyway, he was playing with Keith. And, oh, no, it had to be earlier. Maybe it was 78 or something like that. He was playing with Keith. It was the only time I saw the Jerry Band playing with Keith. And it was, you know, it was a great show. That it was in a gymnasium. That was not great. I mean, a lot of the stories that I had mentioned would be similar to, or to tell a young person would be similar to what I mentioned anytime I mentioned the early shows, which was English Town, and just the nature of how simple it was, how raw it was, you know. And anyway, walk into the bathroom during the break, and there's Keith at the urinal, and he's taking a leak. And it's really only me and him. And we walked in, and I said, "Hey, Keith, what's up?" And he was not a talker, and he didn't have much to say. And he said, "Oh, all right, enjoying the show?" I said, "Yeah, I sure am." And he said, "All right, man, take care, have a good night." You know, that's it. Just something simple. And you don't. I didn't take a picture with him. I didn't. I knew he was on a break. I wasn't gonna talk to him. You know, so I think there's a difference, the approach that young people might have with things these days that I don't think is necessary, you know. And to enjoy it, we already touched on it before, which is enjoy it while you can, enjoy it for what it is. If you like something, go seek out a little bit more. I think that any young person that you're talking to on an interview, I hope that they like the Grateful Dead for a lot of good reasons, but I also hope that they're listening to bluegrass music, and they're listening to all the any you know big bands from the 1940s, you know, and whether or not they got into it, they're getting into that stuff because of their grandfather or their father or their uncle or their aunt or their grandmother or whatever, you know. It's always worth looking back, and it's always worth looking back in history, so that you can apply whatever you want to for whatever they want to do when they're young, and they can enjoy it these days too. They can enjoy all these great bands that are out these days, and I think that's awesome.
Awesome.
So I'm going to be pretty short here. To me, like my first email to you, I signed off music is life.
Hmm.
Um, it, it's more than just the Grateful Dead. You create friendships, you create experiences, you create feelings, emotions. It's just good for you. You should, if like he's saying, if you find a music you like, enjoy it, follow it, meet people, go places. It, it's just part of your life. So that's really all I have to say.
Basically, follow the music. That's a good advice,
Yeah.
Jeff.
I it I think the Dead taught me to understand and listen to music and its complexities. I think it was a way to sort of discover, I don't want to say music theory, but you pick up on the vibe of it, and all the moving parts and how things, and then I could then discover jazz. And like you said, go into Miles Davis and sort of discover all these things because I was able to develop an ear to separate out the different bits and pieces of music in any given moment, be able to sort of zoom in and listen to a particular instrument. And the other bit is it really was like this amazing adventure to be on, and it was a semi-safe environment to kind of go explore, being on the road with your friends and dealing with problem solving. I mean, you had to deal with shit, and like this was a way to deal with people, to deal with the things that come up. So it created this really wonderful opportunity to go kind of explore and learn.
Yeah, sounds like it just was. It's not just the music; it was the experience. It was like everything. It's like the. It sounds, and I love it. I love hearing the stories because I'm like, oh, it must be so cool to not have had a phone and just like go off on a road trip on a motorcycle and just like I'm just gonna drive around the country and camp. Like, who knows where I'm gonna sleep tonight? Like, what? Like, I never had that experience. Okay, what's your question for us, Bob?
Okay, so it's for everybody because we all got to the Grateful Dead through different journeys. I have found with people. So I want all of us to tell me your five favorite bands when you were 15 years old.
Oh,
And I'll start because mine are gonna be pretty darn quick.
okay.
There's Frank Zappa, Genesis with Peter Gabriel, Roxy Music, the Grateful Dead, and the Beatles.
Hmm.
You guys might need to think about it.
Yeah, five is a lot, but I mean,
Four, three,
well,
whatever.
shit.
I mean,
I mean, Bob, I was the first when I first started seeing the Dead. I was 14, so I didn't have a
right.
lot, so
So they're probably one of them.
so there is limited right there. But no, I grew up on as a kid in that during those ages was there was Led Zeppelin. There
Yeah.
was all that kind of stuff. There was absolutely Genesis. You just mentioned Genesis with Gabriel, one of my all-time favorites right there. Um, uh, I'm going to say this. Even at that age, my dad, I was influenced by listening to and I'm sure we all were influenced some stuff that some older adults around us were listening to. Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. You remember
Yeah.
them?
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, fucking amazing jazz,
Yeah.
and stuff, and that's just one. But yeah, and certainly. Oh, and I went to before the '77 show, I went to see Blue Oyster Cult. They had just started. They
Yeah.
weren't
I
really
saw
my
that.
favorite. They weren't really my favorite band or
Yeah.
anything, but they were big at the time. So
They
so
were.
yeah, bands, but mostly progressive bands. Yes.
Yeah.
So
I like Yes.
progressive bands, and traditional rock bands like Led Zeppelin. That's mainly what I was listening
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, I was jotting some down. Dead, Beatles, Doors, Yes. And, these are all sort of the hang out in the basement with your buddies and
Yeah.
listen to
Yeah,
this shit for hours.
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay. I thought of
Yep.
mine. I had enough time to think. Okay. This is when I was 15. I'm only doing bands. I'm not doing artists. Like, I'm not doing like pop artists on this list. This is just rock bands. Okay.
Sure.
So I'm going to go with Red Hot Chili Peppers,
Yeah.
Third Eye Blind,
Yeah.
Foo Fighters, The
Yeah.
Beatles, and the last one's No Doubt.
Nice.
I know all those bands.
Yeah. So that's like that was like that's like my era, you know? So it was like,
Yeah,
because
that's
I
cool.
saw the Red Hot Chili Peppers in concert at that time. I saw the Foo Fighters at that time. And then I loved No Doubt because they had Gwen Stefani as the head singer. And she's very like punk. It was kind of like punky, you know? And I
Yeah.
grew up with a lot of punk rock at the time. And then, of course, the Beatles, because as you guys know, it's like all my reactions are the Beatles, basically. And then, yeah. And Third Eye Blind, I saw them in concert early. It was like they had just come out with their album and they were touring and they came through Redding, California for some reason. We don't know why, but they played at the Redding Civic Auditorium. It's like where I grew
Wow.
up. And so I saw Third Eye Blind like seventh grade, like third row. Wish we could step out from that ledge, my friend. It's a really good song. So, and then I got to see Third Eye Blind again during COVID. They played a outdoor concert at the Ventura Fairgrounds. It
No,
was
that
like a
is-
car.
yeah.
It was a car concert. It was one of those like stay in your car social distancing concerts. So, yeah.
Here's a person who was very influenced by the Grateful Dead, Perry Farrell of Jane's Addiction. And that's worth mentioning there because of look where he went. When he was 14, he was probably listening to the Grateful Dead, right? And then all of a sudden, and then he's got a band called Jane's Addiction, and look what they're doing.
Well,
It's
I'm
amazing.
just glad. No, I'm just glad that I discovered the Dead in this really weird way by being trolled by the fish community. Like, it's the weirdest story of all time. It's like, I went out with the guys, like, do you like fish? I was like, no, why would I like fish? And then they trolled me for making a TikTok. And then all of a sudden I was like, I'm going to make a reaction channel. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, I need to listen to the Dead. And so that's how it happened. So that's how I got into the Dead. It was like,
Well, we're happy to have you.
yeah.
Yep.
But I actually, no, a lot of the songs are catchy. So I'm like, oh, it's nice. And I'm excited. I just like music in general. I like people. I like concerts. So it's like, I love talking about music with people. Like Chris, you guys, all three of you are very musical people. Like you just have a big musical repertoire and it's really fun. So yeah, I think this was a really fun episode. We can always do it again. Plus now I'm adding in the millennial guy and his journey comes from a lot of like, oh, I was into psychedelics and then I discovered the Dead, right? But more grounded than the one psychedelic guy that I interviewed. So like, that was like really out there.
I like that interview. That was fun.
It was out there. Next time we can have like even more people. But I was like, let's just keep it like this. And then if I find a Gen Z, then I'll interview a Gen Z. But that's like young, that's like a 25-year-old. So I have to be like,
Oh, but there's plenty.
There's plenty. And also John Mayer brought in a bunch of girls. That's what John Mayer did for Dead & Co. is that there was all these girls that liked his solo pop stuff.
Well, if you find a Gen Z or a female, maybe not a Mayer, fan.
Yeah, not a fan.
I mean, maybe not the biggest.
No, I'll
fan,
probably
you know,
find a
for other
guy. No, I
reasons.
found these guys on TikTok that they play a lot of like, they play guitar. Like they love playing the Grateful Dead guitar stuff. I think that would be a good person to interview. Like someone who loves the music and is like working on the riffs and stuff, and they listen to Jerry and like they're doing Jerry's riffs. Like I think that would be interesting just because it's like a 25-year-old kid who practices guitar all the time. But
Yeah,
yeah.
Erica,
I'd love to know what their thoughts are about what, you know, the basis for that kind of Grateful Dead music, as opposed to, you know, what their friends might be listening to.
Exactly, but there's plenty of.
you know.
I found these TikTok accounts that are just kids who like they just play Grateful Dead riffs and stuff. So I'm like, okay, I gotta like interview them. So that will be interesting. And then of course I'll meet tons of people my age. But all right, well I gotta go.
Wait.
Oh, one
So
more.
I'd be happy to do this again. It should be after your Dead and Company shows.
Sure, that's soon.
We can
That-
talk
oh,
about
that's
it.
gonna be easy. That's in 3 weeks. So
Yeah, so we can talk about your weekend.
and my agenda is I go to Chicago next weekend. Then I'm going to go to New York too. So I'm going to see Fish 3 nights in Chicago and 2 nights in Forest Hill. So Chris, maybe I can meet you in New York.
Yes, please contact me.
Okay,
Absolutely.
I'm coming.
Yeah.
I'm going to stay in Manhattan, of course, but I'll train out on the E out to Forest Hills, as they call it, Forest Hills. Forest Hills.
Forest
I got to
Hills.
work on
Forest
that
Hills.
accent. Forest Hills. A little,
Queens.
yeah, Queens. Okay, well then yes, so there'll be a lot of follow-up because I have to talk about all that stuff and then going to Dead & Co. and then like, there's so much to do. So, all right, I'll see you all soon. This was amazing.
Okay.
Thanks for being on this episode and I'll see you all soon.
Thanks, Erica.
Okay.
Nice meeting you guys.
Yes.
Nice meeting you. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.